Hello, and welcome to Envision Central Heber. Thanks so much for your interest in this important process. We're going to share a little bit of information that we shared at the workshops that were held on November 30. This will get you up to speed on the project and understand what the next steps are. So we'll dive in. So what is Envision Central Heber? Well, we don't have a crystal ball, but we've seen a lot of growth in the past, and it looks like we will continue to grow. And why do we grow? Well, we experience tremendous economic opportunity in this valley. We have access to a major metropolitan region that's growing and is very vibrant economically. And then our quality of life in this valley is almost unparalleled. We have so much access to beautiful recreation, a great community, friends and family. All of those things are attractive to our kids. Our kids might leave for a time to go to school, for instance, but they often return with their families. This place also becomes attractive for the same reasons to newcomers who become fellow Heber City residents. So Envision Central Heber is an opportunity to identify together our hopes for Central Heber in this context of growth. You may have seen this chart before, but you can see that we've grown pretty rapidly since the 1990s, and that growth is expected to continue. Our current population is about 17,000 people, and by 2050, we're expected to nearly double our city's population. So in this context, why do visioning? Well, we have a lot of decisions to make, and we want to help the public and today's decision makers understand the long-term consequences of the choices that they make now. Then we can better understand the direction we'd like to head. So why envision Central Heber specifically? Well, Central Heber is a regional center. It's the heart of our city. So what happens here matters to those who live here, to those who do business here, and to those who work, shop, eat, play here, whether from our city, our neighborhood, or the larger region. And the Envision Central Heber process is an opportunity now for stakeholders and the public to share their ideas and for the city to listen and learn. And the desired result of this process is a broadly supported long-term vision and plan with enough detail to implement supportive policy. And lots of communities have been through similar processes. St. George has great regional amenities, and they've worked hard on their downtown to make that a great place to live and to visit as well. In Wood Springs, Colorado, they've got a train just like we do, also great regional amenities, and their downtown has become a major destination. So here's a little bit of information about this process and a roadmap for the activities within it. First, this is a public stakeholder process. That means that we provide research and information to stakeholders in the public, and then we spend a lot of time seeking broad public input. We build plans directly from that input, and we're transparent so that you'll see a connection between what you said and what you see us present back to you later on. And we believe that builds momentum for implementation. And this is a similar process to our general planning effort, Envision Heber 2050, which wrapped up a few years ago. We asked people what they valued, what they imagined, how they imagined accommodating anticipated growth. And residents created 25 maps that identified the ways they would like to grow. Those maps were used to create alternative scenarios, which informed the eventual vision, vision principles, and our new general plan. And in that general plan, we received several directives that are pertinent to this process. For instance, enhance and strengthen downtown, the heart of our community. And in quality neighborhoods, consider options for mixed-use housing types, especially adjacent to downtown. And finally, consider changes to grow the tourism and recreation district at 600 West and 400 South. And in the general plan, we did some initial concepting about downtown, but now it's time to look at all of this together in more detail. So this is the Envision Central Heber process. We began with brainstorming workshops on November 30. We're taking information from those maps to develop scenarios. We'll move forward to present those scenarios at an open house, and the public will be able to evaluate them, express what they like and don't like. From there, we'll move toward a vision based on what the public said that will include specific area plans for the 3 sub-areas in this project. And then finally, we'll move toward implementation. You should know that there are some other planning efforts currently underway. There's the UDOT bypass study. Several alternatives have been identified and funding is in process. So that will likely be built within the 2050 timeframe of this planning effort. There are new possibilities for Main Street as the bypass is implemented. For instance, Heber City may eventually own Main Street. There would still be lots of traffic, but no trucks, so there's great potential for the city to do some new things. Imagine a street renovation, slower speeds, medians, a quieter atmosphere. We'd like to hear what you think Main Street could become. And then secondly, there's the airport study going on, but that is out of this study area. Just a quick note about zoning as we look at Central Heber. Along Main Street, north of 300 North and south of 300 South, that's zone C2 suburban commercial, kind of auto-oriented. And then between 300 North and 300 South, zoning is smaller retail historic architecture, mixed use, that's C3. And then around 600 West and 100 South, it's currently zoned industrial, but it's moving toward tourism and recreation use. And here's our study area. Our study area is basically 500 north to 600 south and about 500 east to the ball fields on the west side of the city. It encompasses about 1,400 households, about 4,000 residents, about 280 businesses, and about 2,200 employees. And there are some rough sub-areas that we're looking at. There are 3 of them. Main Street and the blocks surrounding Main Street, the central neighborhoods on either side of Main Street, and then the Recreation and Tourism District to the west. So there's all 3 together. These boundaries are not hard and fast, they're just rough sub-areas, and we'd be interested to know how you would define them. One of the things we began doing with this process is we looked with Zion's Public Finance at a 2050 projection so we could understand how much new growth is possible and likely in the study area and really understand what we're planning together for. Before we dive into the study, let's take a look at a couple more data points. For example, how long do buildings last? Well, retail and warehouse buildings, for example, can turn over a time or 2 or 3 just in your own lifetime. You can probably imagine examples of places where those buildings have rebuilt again and again. Homes, on the other hand, tend to last upwards of 150 years. So in places where land is undeveloped, it makes a lot of sense to think long and hard about where you place housing because it's there for a long time. In existing neighborhoods that are older, it's important to understand where in the life cycle houses are. Some of them have been beautifully maintained for their entire lives and will likely last well past this 150 years. Others, without renovation, may not. Another important consideration is how housing needs change over a lifetime. You might think about the family house you may have grown up in. Maybe that was a single family home. Perhaps when you went away to college, you lived in a dorm. Later on, maybe you got married and lived in an apartment for a time. Maybe you had a child and you moved into a townhouse because you needed more space. And as your family grew, you moved into a larger lot family home. And maybe as you aged, you desired less space, less maintenance. And maybe you moved into a mansion home or something else that has multiple units all in one structure. You may not see yourself in all of these phases, but if you look at your family and your friends, probably you recognize various housing needs. It's important for a community to consider life cycle housing needs as it plans for the future. Now back to the market analysis and study. When we think about retail capture, Heber City is in a great position. It currently captures about 171% of retail sales. So instead of reaching just that 100% capture of its residents, this indicates that lots of people visit or come into the area, whether from Wasatch County or well beyond, to recreate and to make purchases. So great position for Heber to be in. Wasatch County as a whole anticipates about 80 plus new retail acres, and Central Heber should be able to capture 10 to 20% of that. One thing that impacts retail capture is average daily vehicle trips. So here's a graphic from 2019. If you look at Midway Lane coming into Heber City, for instance, that's the road moving from left to right on your screen. You can see that there are about 8,000 daily trips there. By 2050, the same road is seeing about 17,000 trips. So you can see that our major roads are going to see a lot more average daily trips by 2050. Retail capture is also impacted by land use and vacant parcels. You can see on the right that there is not a lot of vacant land in our study area, but if you look at the map on the left, you can see particularly along Main Street, the red, which is commercial. And if you recall from the age of buildings and how long they last, commercial tends to turn over. So you could see a lot of change along Main Street between now and 2050, particularly for retail. And the amount of retail capture downtown depends on a number of things. The competitiveness of other retail sites, for example, matters a lot. So we talked about traffic counts a minute ago. We can think about the availability of vacant land. We can think about retail clusters upon which people can build. And then there's the cost of land and development. Redevelopment costs in downtown could be an impediment because greenfields that are undeveloped are cheaper. The appearance and attractiveness of neighboring properties also makes a difference. And then, particularly important to this process is city policies and economic development, financing tools like tax increment to offset some of the added costs of infill and redevelopment versus greenfield redevelopment. In this area, we'll be looking at a lot of infill and redevelopment, so we'll have to think carefully about policy decisions. Office is just one of those niches that are in flux these days. There are decreasing square feet required per employee in the last several years. We are seeing more people working from home, but on the flip side, we're seeing an increase in shared or co-working spaces, which are popping up all over the place. And then as the population grows, we'll likely see more demand for jobs closer to home. And a desire for that was reflected in our general planning effort a couple of years ago. Housing is another piece that we looked at in this study. Approximately 10 to 25% of housing built before 1925 might be ripe for reinvestment or redevelopment. In the map on the right, you can see that the deep blue properties are those with houses built before 1940. So some of those might be ripe for change. This is another neighborhood outside of Heber City that is about the same age as downtown Heber. You can see here that this is a 1910s house that's been beautifully restored. There's an addition on the back for the current family to make it more livable for them. That's just an example of how housing can change over time. Here's a house that experienced enough decline that it became more prudent to scrape the existing home and rebuild, but the rebuilding to keep within the building setbacks of the historic homes. And here's an example in the same neighborhood. This is a building that faces a commercial street and wraps around to a residential street. In this instance, a couple of declining homes were replaced with this mixed-use building that includes retail fronting the commercial area and apartments on top and in the back that help support that commercial. So how much growth is possible in Central Heber by 2050? Well, we're likely to see about 900 new households and about 1,250 new jobs split among office and retail. And that brings us to maybe the most important question in this process. If not growth in Central Heber, then what? What's the impact on the heart of a community with little economic focus? Well, imagine this. The edges of town attract almost all investment because that's where the land is easier to develop. As a result, we could see that Main Street deteriorates over time as focus simply is elsewhere. Then we're likely to see little reinvestment in central neighborhoods and its housing stock as new neighborhoods develop on the edges. And over time, Central Heber could become undesirable. And the end result is that the city as a whole loses its heart as Central Heber declines over time. That's not something that we want, and that's a huge part of this process. How can we make sure that Central Heber is the healthy heart of our community? We tried to think about that question at recent workshops held on November 30. There were 3 of them for the general public that day. Tasks of the workshop included identifying general values and hopes for Central Heber, and then second, in a context of growth, to explore how to ensure that Central Heber remains the healthy heart of our city in the future through a mapping exercise. We'll be taking this information along with online survey results to move forward with this project. But first, we invite you to participate. The survey online is open. Please take the survey and encourage others to do so as well. We want to hear from as many people as possible about the future of Central Heber. What are your hopes? What do you imagine? Knowing this context of growth, how can we accommodate that growth and make the best Central Heber possible? Then in February, we'll be exploring scenarios, creating from your ideas, and you'll be able to evaluate them, to express what you like and dislike about them, and that will help us move toward a shared community vision for Central Heber. So thank you for your interest in this process. Again, we invite you to be involved. Please check out the survey online at www.envisionheber.com. Thanks so much.